Some betrayals cut deeper than others. When it comes from family, it doesn't just wound, it transforms you. This is the story of how a stolen recipe became the catalyst for something far greater than anyone could have imagined. This is Audrey Cole's journey from heartbreak to triumph, from victim to victor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen timer chimed at exactly 3:47 p.m. on that crisp October afternoon in Portland, Oregon. Audrey Cole, 26 years old with flour-dusted aprons as much a part of her wardrobe as jeans, carefully pulled the final batch of her grandmother's reimagined cinnamon rolls from the oven. The aroma that filled her cramped studio apartment wasn't just cinnamon and sugar, it was pure innovation. For 3 months, Audrey had been perfecting what she privately called sunrise spirals. They weren't just any cinnamon rolls. She had taken her late grandmother Meredith's basic recipe and transformed it into something entirely new. The secret wasn't in the cinnamon or the dough, though she'd perfected both. It was the unexpected layer of cream cheese, infused with local Oregon honey and a hint of cardamom, that she swirled through each roll, creating pockets of creamy surprise in every bite. Then came her masterstroke, a glaze made with brown butter and maple syrup that she brushed on while the rolls were still warm, creating a caramelized top that cracked perfectly when you bit into it. She'd never seen anything quite like them, and apparently, neither had anyone else. The Portland Culinary Arts Festival's annual baking competition had been accepting entries for 6 weeks. Audrey had debated entering for most of that time. Working as a line cook at Murphy's Downtown Grill barely paid her bills, let alone left room for expensive competition entry fees. But her best friend, Maya Chen, had been relentless in her encouragement. "Audrey, these rolls are insane," Maya had said just 2 weeks prior, demolishing her third sunrise spiral during their Sunday morning coffee ritual. "I've traveled to 14 countries for my travel blog, and I've never tasted anything like this. You're literally sitting on a gold mine and working for $12 an hour flipping burgers?" Maya wasn't wrong about Audrey's financial situation. Since graduating from Portland Community College's culinary program 18 months ago, Audrey had been grinding it out in restaurant kitchens, saving every penny she could. Her dream was simple but felt impossible: open her own bakery specializing in innovative comfort foods. She had notebooks filled with recipe ideas, business plans sketched on napkins, and a vision board on her bedroom wall featuring cozy bakery storefronts she'd found online. But dreams required capital, and capital required winning. The Portland Culinary Arts Festival's annual amateur baking competition offered a $5,000 grand prize, enough to finally take her first real step toward that bakery dream. More importantly, the winner would be featured in Portland Monthly magazine and get the chance to cater the festival's VIP reception next year. It was the kind of exposure that could change everything. Audrey had submitted her entry 3 days before the deadline: a dozen perfectly crafted sunrise spirals accompanied by a 2-page description of her innovative technique and flavor profile. She'd even included a brief story about how her grandmother Meredith had taught her to bake, though she'd been careful to emphasize that this recipe was entirely her own creation. What she hadn't mentioned in her entry was why this competition meant so much more than just the money. Audrey was the youngest of 3 Cole daughters, born when her sisters were already teenagers. Jessica, now 34, was a successful marketing executive in Seattle with a corner office and a 6-figure salary. Vanessa, 31, had just made partner at a prestigious law firm in San Francisco. Both sisters had followed traditional paths to success, paths that their parents, Robert and Linda Cole, understood and celebrated. Audrey's culinary dreams, however, had always been met with polite skepticism at family gatherings. "Cooking is a lovely hobby, sweetheart, but you need something stable to fall back on." Her father was more direct. "The restaurant business chews up young people and spits them out. Look at some real careers." This competition wasn't just about winning money or recognition from strangers. It was about proving to her family and to herself that her dreams weren't childish fantasies. It was about showing that innovation and creativity could be just as valuable as law degrees and marketing campaigns. The judging had taken place the previous weekend at the Portland Convention Center. Audrey had arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, her sunrise spirals carefully transported in climate-controlled containers she'd borrowed from Murphy's. The competition was fierce. 43 entries from amateur bakers across the Pacific Northwest, each bringing their absolute best. She'd watched nervously as the 5 judges, including James Morrison from the Food Network and chef Isabella Rodriguez from Portland's acclaimed Tieta restaurant, sampled her creation. Their faces revealed nothing, but she noticed they each took second bites. That had to be a good sign, right?
Now, a week later, she was stress baking, again, while waiting for the results. The festival organizers had promised to announce winners by 4 p.m. today, via email and phone calls. Her phone, sitting on the kitchen counter next to her laptop, had been silent all afternoon. At 4:23 p.m., her phone finally rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, with a Portland area code. "Hello, this is Audrey," she answered, her voice slightly breathless. "Audrey Cole? This is Jennifer Walsh from the Portland Culinary Arts Festival. I'm calling with some wonderful news." Audrey's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes?" "Congratulations! Your sunrise spirals have won first place in our annual amateur baking competition. The judges were unanimous in their decision. They've never tasted anything quite like your innovative take on cinnamon rolls." The words hit Audrey like a physical force. She actually took a step backward, pressing her free hand against the kitchen counter for support. Are you serious? I actually won?" Jennifer's laugh was warm and genuine. "You absolutely won. The judges couldn't stop talking about the complexity of flavors and the perfect execution. James Morrison specifically mentioned that your technique showed both technical skill and genuine creativity. You'll receive the $5,000 prize, of course, plus the feature in Portland Monthly and the catering opportunity for next year's VIP reception." Audrey's heart hammered against her ribs. "There was one more thing. We'd love to do a follow-up interview with you next week about your inspiration and your plans for the prize money. This kind of innovation is exactly what we love to celebrate at the festival." After hanging up, Audrey stood in her tiny kitchen for several minutes, just breathing. She looked around at her modest space, the mismatched appliances, the single bowl she used for everything, the narrow counter where she developed her prize-winning recipe. This was where it all started. This was where she'd proven that dreams weren't just wishful thinking. Her first call was to Maya, who screamed so loudly that Audrey had to hold the phone away from her ear. Her second call was to her parents. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," her mother exclaimed, though I could hear the surprise in Linda's voice. $5,000? What will you do with it?" "I'm going to use it as seed money for my bakery," Audrey said, feeling more confident about that dream than she ever had before. "This is just the beginning, Mom." For the first time in her life, Audrey felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. She had no idea that in just 2 weeks, everything would change. She had no idea that her moment of pure triumph was about to become the catalyst for the most challenging period of her life. But she also had no idea how much stronger she was about to become. As the sun set over Portland that evening, Audrey Cole was simply a young woman who had just won her first major competition, holding her phone and planning the future she'd always dreamed of. The betrayal that would shatter her world was 13 days away. For now, she was just happy. And that happiness, though it wouldn't last, would become the foundation for everything that came next.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Can't wait to try this improved version. Your grandmother's recipe was good, but your additions make it restaurant quality. Audrey's cigarette had burned down to the filter without her noticing. She dropped it and immediately called Jessica's number. "Hey, Audrey!" Jessica's voice was cheerful, almost artificially so. "Did you see my post? I've been getting such amazing response. 3 local food magazines have already reached out about featuring the recipe." "Jessica," Audrey's voice was barely controlled, "that's my recipe." A pause. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean. Those are my sunrise spirals. The recipe I won the Portland competition with. The one I've been developing for months." "Audrey, come on." Jessica's tone shifted, becoming slightly patronizing. "It's Grandma Meredith's cinnamon roll recipe. We all grew up making it. I just made some improvements." "Improvements?" Audrey's voice cracked. "Jessica, you copied my recipe exactly. The honey cardamom cream cheese, the brown butter glaze, even the technique for the caramelized top. Those aren't improvements to Grandma's recipe. That's my completely original work." "Look, I understand you're upset, but this is a family recipe that belongs to all of us. I had every right to share my version." "Your version?" Audrey was shouting now, drawing stares from other Murphy's employees on their smoke breaks. "Jessica, you've never made a cinnamon roll in your life. You can barely make toast without burning it." "That's not fair, Audrey. Just because cooking isn't my main career doesn't mean I can't experiment in my own kitchen." "Stop lying." The words exploded out of Audrey with such force that she surprised herself. "I know you, Jessica. I know you didn't develop this recipe. I know you copied mine exactly and just changed the name." The line went quiet for a long moment. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was cold in a way Audrey had never heard before. "Prove it," Jessica said simply. "You entered a competition with a family recipe and made some modifications. I did the same thing independently. Great minds think alike, I guess." "I have the original competition entry. I have photos of my development process. I have witnesses. And I have a successful food blog with 40,000 followers and 3 magazine deals in the works," Jessica interrupted. "I have photos of my versions too, and a story that makes sense. A marketing executive who loves to cook improving her grandmother's recipe. Versus," she paused meaningfully, "a line cook who's struggling to make rent, claiming she invented something that's clearly based on family traditions." The cruelty in her sister's voice hit Audrey like a physical blow. This wasn't the Jessica she'd grown up with, the sister who used to braid her hair and help with homework. This was someone she didn't recognize. "Why?" Audrey whispered. "Why would you do this to me?" "Do what? Share a family recipe on my blog? Audrey, you're being dramatic. This isn't about you." But it was about her. It was about everything she worked for, everything she dreamed of being stolen by the person who was supposed to support her most. As Audrey stood in the alley behind Murphy's Downtown Grill, staring at her sister's blog post on her cracked phone screen, she realized something that changed everything. Jessica wasn't going to back down. She wasn't going to admit what she'd done. She was going to fight for ownership of something that belonged entirely to Audrey. For the first time in her 26 years, Audrey Cole understood that sometimes the people closest to you could become strangers overnight. Sometimes family could become the enemy. And sometimes, when everything you've built is threatened, you have to decide who you really are.
2 weeks after her victory, Audrey Cole's life had taken on a surreal quality. The $5,000 check sat framed on her kitchen counter, not because she planned to keep it there, but because she couldn't quite believe it was real. She'd already scheduled meetings with 3 commercial real estate agents to look at potential bakery locations, and her notebook was filled with supplier contacts and equipment wish lists. The Portland Monthly interview had gone better than she'd imagined. Staff writer Marcus Thompson had spent 2 hours at her apartment, photographing her in her tiny kitchen and listening to her story with genuine fascination. He'd even taken notes while she walked him through the sunrise spirals recipe, though she'd been careful to leave out a few key details about timing and temperature. Some secrets needed protecting.
This is exactly the kind of local innovation story our readers love, Marcus had told her as he packed up his camera equipment. Young entrepreneur, family recipe with a twist, Portland-made success. The piece should run in next month's issue. Audrey had floated on that high for 3 days. Then reality set in during her Tuesday evening shift at Murphy's Downtown Grill. "Cole, order up!" Chef Bradley Morrison, no relation to the Food Network judge, slammed the bell harder than necessary. He'd been increasingly irritated since learning about her competition win, making snide comments about prima donna line cooks and people who think they're too good for honest work. As Audrey plated the third overcooked salmon of the night, her phone buzzed in her back pocket. She ignored it. Bradley had strict rules for phones during service. But when it buzzed again 5 minutes later, then again, she began to worry. Maya was out of town visiting family in Vancouver, and her parents rarely texted this late. During her smoke break at 9 p.m., she finally checked her messages. The first was from her sister Jessica in Seattle. "OMG, Audrey! Just saw your recipe online. So proud of you." Audrey's stomach lurched. The Portland Monthly article wasn't supposed to run for another 2 weeks. The second message was from Vanessa. "Wait, something's not right here. Call me ASAP." The third was from her mother. "Honey, I'm confused. Can you call when you get a chance?" With shaking hands, Audrey opened her browser and searched for sunrise spirals. What she found made her legs nearly give out. The first result was a food blog called Comfort Kitchen Chronicles, with a post dated that morning. "My grandmother's improved cinnamon rolls. Family recipe gets a modern update." The author's bio photo showed a woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and a bright smile. The name beneath read, Madison Rivers, food blogger and recipe developer. But Audrey recognized that smile. She'd grown up with it. Madison Rivers was Jessica's married name, Jessica Cole Rivers. Audrey's hands were trembling so badly she could barely scroll down to read the full post. When she did, her heart stopped completely. The recipe was her sunrise spirals, described in Jessica's voice as if she'd developed it herself. Every detail was there. The honey cardamom cream cheese filling, the brown butter maple glaze, even the specific technique for achieving the caramelized top. But the story wrapped around the recipe was completely different. "This recipe has been in my family for 3 generations, Jessica had written. "My grandmother Meredith's original cinnamon rolls were delicious, but I knew they could be elevated with some modern touches. After months of experimentation in my Seattle kitchen, I've finally perfected what I call Grandma's Golden Spirals, an improved version that brings restaurant-quality complexity to a beloved family classic." Audrey read the post 3 times, each reading making her sicker. Jessica had taken her recipe word for word, but rebranded it completely. She'd even included professional-looking photos that clearly weren't taken in Jessica's apartment. Audrey could tell because she knew Jessica's kitchen, and this wasn't it. The worst part was the comment section. Dozens of food bloggers and home bakers were praising Jessica's innovation and creative improvement of a family recipe. Several had already tried making the rolls and posted photos of their results. "Madison, these are incredible. The cardamom is such a sophisticated touch. I've been making cinnamon rolls for 20 years and never thought of the brown butter glaze. Genius!" The next morning, Audrey called in sick to Murphy's for the first time in 18 months. She couldn't face Bradley Morrison's sneers or the familiar routine of prepping vegetables when her entire world had been turned upside down. Instead, she sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open, a cold cup of coffee growing a film beside her, methodically documenting everything. She started with screenshots, Jessica's blog post, the comments praising her innovation, the timestamps showing when everything was published. Then she gathered her own evidence, photos of her recipe development process dating back 3 months, the original competition entry with its submission timestamp, even text messages to Maya describing her experiments with different glaze techniques. By noon, she had assembled what felt like an airtight case. But as she stared at the folder labeled Recipe Theft Evidence on her desktop, a crushing realization settled over her. Evidence meant nothing if no one cared enough to look at it. Her phone had been buzzing all morning with messages she hadn't answered. Maya, back from Vancouver and apparently seeing the blog post. Her parents, confused by the conflicting stories they were hearing. Even Marcus Thompson from Portland Monthly asking if she wanted to comment on the family recipe situation before his article ran. At 12:47 p.m., her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Maya Chen standing in the hallway with a bag from their favorite Thai restaurant and an expression that could have melted steel. "Open the door, Audrey! I brought pad Thai and I'm not leaving until we figure this out." Maya had been Audrey's closest friend since their first day at Portland Community College's culinary program. Where Audrey was cautious and methodical, Maya was bold and direct. Her travel blog had taken off precisely because she wasn't afraid to call out bad restaurants or challenge local food traditions. If anyone would know how to fight back against Jessica's theft, it would be Maya. "I read the whole thing," Maya said, without preamble, settling cross-legged on Audrey's living room floor and unpacking containers of food. 3 times. Then I went through Jessica's entire blog archive. Audrey looked up from her laptop. "And?" "She's been running this blog for 8 months, and this is her first original recipe post. Everything else is restaurant reviews, travel food guides, and reposted recipes from other sources. She's got decent traffic, but no real credibility in the food community." Maya opened her own laptop and turned it toward Audrey. "Look at this." The screen showed Jessica's blog analytics, somehow accessed through Maya's network of food blogger contacts. The numbers weren't impressive. Jessica's Grandma's Golden Spirals post had gotten more views in 18 hours than her previous 5 posts combined. She's desperate for content that will actually engage her audience. Your recipe was probably the best thing that ever happened to her blog. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Audrey picked at her pad thai, her appetite non-existent. "What can I do? She's family. I can't exactly sue my own sister." "Actually, you probably could. Recipe theft is a real thing, especially when there's money involved. But lawsuits are expensive and messy, and they take forever." Maya leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "But there's another way. You could outcompete her." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Jessica stole your recipe, but she doesn't understand what makes it special. She can copy the ingredients, but she can't replicate your story, your passion, or your expertise. She's a marketing executive who stumbled onto something good. You're the actual chef who created it." Maya pulled up another window on her laptop, a basic website template. "What if we build you a platform that's bigger and better than hers? What if we turn this theft into the launch of your own food empire?" The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Audrey had always imagined starting small, maybe with a local bakery that could slowly build a reputation. Maya was suggesting she leap directly into the digital food world, competing with established bloggers and influencers who have years of experience. "I don't know the first thing about food blogging," Audrey said. "But you know everything about food. You know how to develop recipes, how to explain techniques, and how to tell the story behind each dish. That's the hard part. The technical stuff, websites, social media, photography, we can figure that out."
Maya opened another tab, showing Jessica's Instagram account. It had 12,000 followers, mostly featuring perfectly staged photos of restaurant meals and lifestyle shots from Seattle. "She's playing in the shallow end," Maya said. "Pretty pictures, borrowed recipes, surface-level food content. You could create something with real depth, actual recipe development, technique tutorials, the science behind baking innovations." Audrey felt something stirring in her chest. Not quite hope, but something closer to determination. Even if I could build an audience, how does that help with Jessica stealing my recipe? Simple. You create so much original, high-quality content that when people search for innovative cinnamon roll recipes, your name comes up first, not hers. You become known as the person who actually develops these techniques, not someone who reposts them. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up examples of successful food bloggers who had built massive followings through recipe innovation. Look at this. Claire Saffitz left Bon Appetit and built her own brand around technique and development. Christina Tosi turned unusual flavor combinations into a dessert empire. You have something neither of them had when they started, a viral recipe that's already proven to work. The concept was beginning to take shape in Audrey's mind. Instead of trying to reclaim something Jessica had stolen, she could use her actual expertise to build something entirely new and better. The Portland Monthly article is still running next week, Audrey said slowly. Marcus Thompson interviewed me as the creator of Sunrise Spirals. That gives me credibility as the original developer. Exactly. And we can use that article as the foundation for everything else. Launch a food blog the same week it publishes, start with the full Sunrise Spiral story, including the theft, then follow up with variations and new recipes that prove you're the real innovator. Maya's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up examples of successful food bloggers who had built massive followings through recipe innovation. Look at this! Claire Saffitz left Bon Appetit and built her own brand around technique and development. Christina Tosi turned unusual flavor combinations into a dessert empire. You have something neither of them had when they started, a viral recipe that's already proven to work. The concept was beginning to take shape in Audrey's mind. Instead of trying to reclaim something Jessica had stolen, she could use her actual expertise to build something entirely new and better. The Portland Monthly article is still running next week, Audrey said slowly. Marcus Thompson interviewed me as the creator of Sunrise Spirals. That gives me credibility as the original developer. Exactly! And we can use that article as the foundation for everything else. Launch a food blog the same week it publishes, start with the full Sunrise Spiral story, including the theft, then follow up with variations and new recipes that prove you're the real innovator. Maya was getting excited now, the way she always did when a plan started coming together. We document everything. Video tutorials showing your technique, step-by-step photos that prove you understand the science behind each component, content that Jessica could never fake because she doesn't actually know how to do what you do. For the first time since discovering Jessica's betrayal, Audrey felt a spark of her old confidence returning. She looked around her tiny apartment, the kitchen where she'd developed Sunrise Spirals, the notebook filled with other recipe ideas, the vision board still hanging on her bedroom wall. I'd need equipment, she said, testing the idea out loud. A decent camera, better lighting, maybe some basic video equipment. The competition prize money, Maya said immediately. Instead of using it for a brick-and-mortar bakery, invest it in building your digital presence. Create content for 6 months, build an audience, then use that platform to launch whatever physical business you want. The irony wasn't lost on Audrey. She would use the money she had earned from creating Sunrise Spirals to fight back against the person who'd stolen them. But there was a poetic justice to it that felt right. If I do this, Audrey said carefully, I'm not just competing with Jessica. I'm essentially declaring war on my own family. Maya's expression grew serious. Audrey, she already declared war on you. She stole your work, lied about developing it herself, and when you confronted her, she threatened to destroy your credibility. The war started when she hit publish on that blog post. Audrey closed her laptop and looked out her apartment window at the Portland skyline. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably fielding calls from food magazines, building a career on Audrey's innovation. In just 24 hours, her sister had gone from family to enemy. But Maya was right about one thing. Audrey had something Jessica would never have. She had the real knowledge, the genuine passion, and the ability to create things that had never existed before. For the first time since this nightmare began,
Audrey Cole smiled. Okay, let's do it. The camera equipment arrived on a rainy Thursday morning, 3 days after Audrey had made her decision to fight back. She'd spent $2,800 of her prize money on a professional DSLR, lighting kit, tripod, and basic video editing software. More money than she'd ever spent on anything except rent. As she unpacked each piece in her cramped living room, the magnitude of what she was attempting began to sink in. Maya had helped her set up social media accounts. At Audrey Creates Food on Instagram, a YouTube channel called Audrey's Kitchen Lab, and a website domain at audreycreatesfood.com. The branding was clean and professional, emphasizing innovation and authenticity. But staring at the empty profiles with 0 followers felt overwhelming. Everyone starts at 0, Maya had reminded her. Even Julia Child had to cook her first meal on camera. Audrey's first attempt at food photography was a disaster. The lighting was harsh and unflattering, creating deep shadows that made her carefully crafted test batch of sunrise spirals look unappetizing. The camera settings confused her, and after 2 hours of struggling, she had exactly 3 usable photos, none of which matched the polished aesthetic of established food bloggers. Her first video attempt was worse. She'd planned a simple tutorial showing her brown butter glaze technique, but discovered that talking to a camera while cooking required an entirely different skill set than just cooking. She stumbled over words, forgot key steps, and accidentally knocked over her measuring cup, sending maple syrup cascading across her counter. "Take 47, she muttered, resetting the camera for what felt like the 100th time. Meanwhile, Jessica's blog was gaining momentum. The Grandma's Golden Spirals post had been shared by 2 major food Instagram accounts, bringing her follower count to nearly 15,000 in just 1 week. Food and Wine magazine had contacted her about featuring the recipe in their holiday issue, and a Seattle-based morning show wanted her to demonstrate the technique on air. Every notification about Jessica's success felt like a knife twist. Audrey found herself obsessively checking Jessica's social media, watching her sister smile brightly as she discussed her recipe with local news anchors who had no idea they were promoting stolen work. The breaking point came during Audrey's 3rd week of content creation attempts. She'd finally managed to produce a decent-looking video tutorial for her signature glaze technique, carefully edited and uploaded to YouTube with optimized tags and descriptions. After 24 hours, it had garnered exactly 11 views, and 3 were her own. That same day, Jessica posted a video of herself making her sunrise spirals on Instagram stories, casually mentioning that she was perfecting the family recipe for an upcoming cookbook deal. The video got over 2,000 views and hundreds of comments within hours. Audrey threw her phone across the room, where it landed with a crack against her bedroom wall. "This isn't working," she told Maya during their emergency coffee meeting that afternoon. "That's exactly why you're going to win in the long run." Maya studied her friend's exhausted face. Dark circles shadowed Audrey's eyes, and her usually neat ponytail was disheveled from running her hands through it in frustration. "How long did it take you to perfect sunrise spirals?" Maya asked. 3 months of daily experimentation. "And how long have you been trying to master food photography and videography?" 3 weeks. "Right. So why are you expecting to become an expert content creator faster than you became an expert baker?" It was a fair point, but it didn't ease Audrey's frustration. "Jessica doesn't need to master anything. She just steals my recipe and presents it better than I can." Maya leaned forward. "That's exactly why you're going to win in the long run. Jessica can steal one recipe, maybe a few, but she can't steal your mind, your creativity, or your ability to innovate. She's a one-hit wonder pretending to be an artist." To prove her point, Maya pulled out her laptop and navigated to Jessica's blog. Look at her post from yesterday. The latest entry was titled, "Easy Weeknight Pasta, My Go-To Comfort Food." But as Audrey read through the recipe, she realized the recipe was nearly identical to one from a popular food blog called The Pioneer Woman, with only minor word changes.
"She's plagiarizing again," Audrey said, her anger flaring. Exactly, because she doesn't actually know how to develop original content. She's running on borrowed time. And eventually, people will notice. Maya was right, but the validation felt hollow when Jessica's follower count continued climbing, while Audrey's remained stubbornly low. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during Audrey's 4th week of content creation. She'd been experimenting with a new recipe, cardamom orange scones with a honey glaze, and decided to document the development process rather than just the final result. Instead of trying to create a polished tutorial, she filmed herself actually working through the recipe challenges in real time. "Okay, so that didn't work," she said to the camera after her first batch came out too dense. "The cardamom is overpowering the orange, and the texture is more like hockey pucks than scones. Let me try adjusting the ratios." She kept the camera rolling through her second attempt, explaining her thought process as she reduced the cardamom and modified her mixing technique. When that batch also failed, too dry this time, she didn't stop filming. "This is actually perfect," she told the camera with a laugh that was equal parts frustration and determination. "This is what real recipe development looks like. It's not magic, it's problem solving." Her third attempt was closer, but still not right. The fourth was good, but not great. By the 5th batch, she'd achieved what she was looking for: scones that were tender and flaky with perfectly balanced flavors. Instead of editing out the failures, she kept them in. The final video was 12 minutes of authentic recipe development, showing every mistake and explaining the reasoning behind each adjustment. She titled it, "How I Actually Develop Recipes: Cardamom Orange Scones, 5 Attempts." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours, the video had 847 views and dozens of comments from home bakers thanking her for showing the real process instead of pretending everything worked perfectly the first time. "Finally, someone who shows that baking is about experimentation, not perfection," wrote one commenter. "I've been following food channels for years, and nobody ever shows their failures. This is so much more helpful than perfect tutorials," wrote another. Within a week, the video had over 5,000 views and had been shared by several established food bloggers who praised its authenticity. Audrey gained 300 followers across her platforms and, more importantly, found her unique voice in the crowded food content space. The lesson was transformative. While Jessica was trying to maintain a perfect facade built on stolen work, Audrey's willingness to show vulnerability and genuine expertise was resonating with audiences hungry for authenticity. For the first time since starting this journey, Audrey felt like she was building something that could actually compete with Jessica's stolen success. She wasn't just learning to create content, she was discovering that her greatest strength lay not in perfection, but in transparency. As she edited her next video, a deep dive into the science of gluten development in different types of dough, Audrey realized something crucial. Jessica could steal her recipes, but she couldn't steal her mind or her willingness to fail publicly in service of learning. That authenticity was about to become Audrey's secret weapon. 6 weeks into her content creation journey, Audrey received a phone call that changed everything. She was in the middle of testing her 7th iteration of a lavender lemon tart when Portland Monthly's Marcus Thompson called with news that made her blood run cold. "Audrey, I need to ask you about something before we publish your feature next week," Marcus said, his usually warm tone notably cautious. "I received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your sister. She says there's been some confusion about the ownership of the Sunrise Spirals recipe." Audrey's hand tightened around her phone. What kind of confusion? According to Jessica Rivers, I believe that's her married name, the recipe you submitted to the competition was actually developed collaboratively by both of you, based on your grandmother's original. She says you may have given us the impression that you were the sole creator when that wasn't accurate. The manipulation was so smooth, so carefully crafted, that Audrey almost admired its evil brilliance. Jessica wasn't directly accusing her of lying, just suggesting there had been a misunderstanding about collaborative work.
Marcus, I need to ask you about something before we publish your feature next week, Marcus said, his usually warm tone notably cautious. I received a call yesterday from someone claiming to be your sister. She says there's been some confusion about the ownership of the sunrise spirals recipe. Audrey's hand tightened around her phone. What kind of confusion? According to Jessica Rivers, I believe that's her married name, the recipe you submitted to the competition was actually developed collaboratively by both of you, based on your grandmother's original. She says you may have given us the impression that you were the sole creator, when that wasn't accurate. The manipulation was so smooth, so carefully crafted, that Audrey almost admired its evil brilliance. Jessica wasn't directly accusing her of lying, just suggesting there had been a misunderstanding about collaborative work. Marcus, I need to ask you about something before we publish your feature next week. I have never collaborated with Jessica on any recipe in my life. I developed sunrise spirals entirely on my own over 3 months of experimentation in my apartment. I have photos, timestamps, and witnesses to prove it. I'm sure you do, Marcus replied diplomatically, but Portland Monthly can't publish an article that might be factually disputed. Legal has concerns about running a feature that could become part of a family lawsuit. So you're killing the article? We're postponing it until this gets resolved. I'm sorry, I know how much this feature meant to you. After hanging up, Audrey sat in her kitchen for 20 minutes, staring at her half-finished lavender lemon tart. The Portland Monthly article had been her credibility cornerstone, the third-party validation that would have established her as the original creator of Sunrise Spirals. Without it, her word against Jessica's became just another social media dispute. But the real gut punch came 3 hours later when Maya called, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Audrey, you need to see Jessica's latest blog post right now. Audrey opened her laptop with trembling fingers and navigated to Comfort Kitchen Chronicles. The newest post, published just an hour ago, was titled, Setting the Record Straight, My Recipe Development Journey. It was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as vulnerable honesty. Jessica had written, I've received some questions lately about my recipe development process, particularly regarding my grandma's Golden Spirals post. I want to be completely transparent with my readers about how I create content, because honesty is the foundation of everything I do here. The truth is, recipe development often involves collaboration and inspiration from multiple sources. In the case of my grandmother's cinnamon rolls, I worked extensively with my younger sister Audrey, who has formal culinary training. We spent months texting back and forth about different techniques, and she was invaluable in helping me refine the technical aspects of the recipe. I want to give Audrey full credit for her contributions to the development process. She's incredibly talented, and her input was essential in creating the final version that I shared with all of you. I should have acknowledged her assistance more clearly in my original post. The post continued for another 8 paragraphs, painting Jessica as a generous collaborator who had simply failed to properly credit her co-developer sister. She included screenshots of text conversations Audrey didn't remember having, discussing techniques she'd never shared with Jessica. The comment section was filled with praise for Jessica's honesty and grace in handling family dynamics. Several readers noted how mature she was being in giving credit where it was due, and how this kind of transparency made them trust her content even more.
Audrey scrolled back up to examine the text message screenshots more carefully. With growing horror, she realized they were real conversations she'd had with Jessica, but they'd been taken completely out of context and carefully edited. One screenshot showed Audrey texting, "The key is getting the butter to the right temperature for the glaze. Too hot and it separates. Too cool and it won't caramelize properly." In the original conversation from 2 months ago, Audrey had been explaining a technique she was developing for an entirely different recipe, a burnt butter sauce for pasta. Jessica had asked about it after seeing Audrey post about it on Instagram. But in the blog post context,
It appeared to be collaborative discussion about cinnamon roll glaze development. Another screenshot showed Audrey writing, "I think the cardamom might be too strong. What if we tried reducing it by half?" That text had been from a conversation about a completely different project, Audrey helping Jessica plan a dinner party menu. Jessica had wanted to make an Indian-inspired dessert and had asked for Audrey's opinion on spice ratios. But presented without context, it looked like collaborative recipe development. Jessica had weaponized months of normal sister conversations, creating a narrative of collaboration where none had existed. It was sophisticated, subtle, and absolutely devastating. The worst part was that Jessica's version was believable. She wasn't claiming to have invented everything herself anymore. She was positioned as the older, more business-savvy sister who had collaborated with her talented younger sibling and simply needed to be more explicit about giving credit. It made her look generous and professional while making Audrey look like someone seeking attention for work that wasn't entirely her own. Within hours, Jessica's clarification post had been shared across food blogging networks, with many industry professionals praising her transparency and maturity. Several comments specifically mentioned how refreshing it was to see someone handle a family business dispute with such grace. Meanwhile, Audrey's authentic content creation videos suddenly looked different in this new context. Instead of being seen as educational transparency, her willingness to show failures and explain her process could now be interpreted as someone trying too hard to prove her expertise. Maya arrived at Audrey's apartment that evening with Chinese takeout and a laptop full of research. "She's good," Maya said without preamble. "Evil, but good. She's turned this into a narrative where she's the reasonable adult handling a family situation professionally, and you're the overreaching little sister trying to claim more credit than you deserve." Audrey pushed her lo mein around her plate, her appetite non-existent. "The Portland Monthly article is dead. My credibility is shot. She's got 15,000 followers who now see her as honest and transparent. I don't know how to fight this." Maya opened her laptop and turned it toward Audrey. "Then we stop fighting her version of the story and start telling our own. But we're going to have to be smarter than she is." "What do you mean?" "Jessica is playing checkers, tactical moves to protect her immediate position. We're going to play chess, long-term strategy that builds something she can't touch or steal." Maya pulled up Audrey's content analytics. "Your authentic recipe development videos are gaining traction with serious home bakers and culinary professionals, people who understand technique and innovation. Jessica's audience is broader but shallower, lifestyle followers who want pretty pictures and easy recipes. How does that help me?" Because Jessica made a critical mistake in her clarification post. She positioned you as the technical expert and herself as the business person, which means every time you demonstrate genuine expertise that she can't match, you undermine her credibility. Maya's eyes were bright with the kind of strategic thinking that had made her travel blog successful. "We're going to let Jessica have her stolen recipe and her lifestyle audience. We're going to build you into such a recognizable authority on recipe development that when people want real innovation, they come to you, not her." For the first time in days, Audrey felt a flicker of hope. "You think that can work?" "I think Jessica just challenged you to a game she doesn't know how to play. She can steal recipes, but she can't steal expertise. And expertise," Maya smiled grimly, "is what wins in the long run." 3 weeks after Jessica's devastating clarification post, Audrey was ready to quit. Her follower count had plateaued at just under 2,000. Her latest video tutorial had received only 43 views, and she'd burned through most of her remaining prize money on ingredients for increasingly elaborate recipe experiments that seemed to interest no one. She was boxing up her camera equipment when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from New York with a 212 area code. "Is this Audrey Cole?" The voice was crisp, professional, slightly impatient. "Yes." This is David Chen from Serious Eats. I'm a senior editor here. I've been following your recipe development videos, particularly your series on gluten science and fermentation techniques. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Audrey nearly dropped the phone. Serious Eats was the holy grail of food media, a publication known for rigorous testing, scientific approach to cooking, and uncompromising standards. Being noticed by them was like being discovered by a talent scout. Of course, she managed. I'm putting together a feature on emerging voices in food science education. Your approach to showing actual development process instead of just final results is exactly what we're looking for. Most food content creators are afraid to show failure, but you've turned it into a teaching tool. Audrey's heart was pounding. I appreciate that. I've always believed that understanding why something fails is more educational than just seeing success. Exactly. Look, I'll be direct. We'd like to commission you for a piece, a deep dive into laminated dough techniques showing your development process for creating a new pastry application, something that demonstrates both technical skill and innovation. The pay is $1,500 plus byline credit and exposure to our 2 million readers. After hanging up, Audrey sat in stunned silence. Serious Eats didn't commission just anyone. They were known for working with established chefs, food scientists, and culinary school instructors. For them to approach a relatively unknown content creator meant her work was being taken seriously at the highest levels of food media. But the real breakthrough came when she decided what to create for the commission. For weeks, she'd been experimenting with something she called reverse lamination. Instead of folding butter into dough, she was exploring ways to incorporate flavored elements into the butter layers themselves. Traditional croissant making created flaky layers through butter and dough interaction. But what if the butter layers themselves carried complex flavors that would intensify during baking? Her first experiments had been disasters. Herb-infused butter burned during baking. Fruit purees made the butter too wet, destroying the lamination structure. Chocolate additions seized and became grainy. But each failure taught her something about heat tolerance, moisture content, and flavor stability under high temperatures. The breakthrough came during her 15th attempt, when she discovered that freeze-dried ingredients could be powdered and incorporated into butter without disrupting its structure or burning during baking. Freeze-dried strawberries ground into a fine powder and mixed with high-quality European butter created layers that delivered intense fruit flavor without compromising the pastry's flaky texture. She'd developed 3 successful applications: strawberry vanilla laminated palmiers that tasted like sophisticated Pop-Tarts, savory herb parmesan layers that created complex umami notes in croissant dough, and a coffee cardamom version that produced pastries with built-in flavor complexity that intensified with each bite. The process was technically demanding, requiring precise temperature control, specific timing for ingredient incorporation, and an understanding of how different powdered elements affected butter's melting point. It was exactly the kind of innovation that Jessica could never replicate because it required genuine understanding of food science principles. Audrey spent 2 weeks perfecting her technique and documenting every step for Serious Eats. She filmed multiple versions of each pastry, explaining the science behind temperature control, the chemistry of how freeze-dried ingredients behaved differently from fresh ones, and the physics of maintaining proper lamination structure with modified butter.
When she submitted her article and accompanying videos to David Chen, his response came within hours. "This is exactly what we were hoping for," he wrote. "Your reverse lamination technique is genuinely innovative. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of food editing. We're fast-tracking this for publication next week, and I'd like to discuss making you a regular contributor." The Serious Eats article, titled Reverse Lamination, Building Flavor into Pastry Layers, went live on a Tuesday morning and exploded across social media within hours. Food scientists shared it on Twitter, culinary school instructors added it to reading lists, and professional pastry chefs began experimenting with Audrey's technique in their own kitchens. Within 24 hours, Audrey's Instagram followers jumped from 1,847 to 12,000. Her YouTube subscriber count tripled. Most importantly, the comments weren't from casual food enthusiasts, they were from industry professionals, culinary school students, and serious home bakers who understood and appreciated the technical innovation. This is the kind of content that pushes the entire field forward, wrote one James Beard Award-winning pastry chef. Finally, someone doing actual food science education instead of just pretty pictures, commented a culinary school professor. The contrast with Jessica's content couldn't have been more stark. While Jessica continued posting lifestyle-focused recipe reposts and pretty Instagram photos, Audrey was now being recognized as a legitimate innovator by the people who actually understood food science. But the real validation came 3 days after the Serious Eats publication, when Audrey received a phone call that changed everything. Audrey Cole? This is Chef Isabella Rodriguez from Tierra Restaurant. I was one of the judges at the Portland Culinary Arts Festival competition where you won with your cinnamon rolls. Audrey remembered Chef Rodriguez, an intimidating woman with exacting standards who ran one of Portland's most acclaimed restaurants. I've been following the situation with your family member's blog. I also read your Serious Eats piece yesterday. I want you to know that anyone with actual culinary expertise can immediately see which one of you is the real innovator. She paused, and Audrey could hear kitchen sounds in the background. I'm calling because I have a proposition. I'm opening a second location of Tierra next year, a casual cafe focused on innovative pastries and breakfast items. I need someone who can develop a menu that's technically sophisticated but approachable, someone who understands food science but can also teach techniques to my pastry team. Audrey's breath caught. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. 20% ownership, full creative control over the pastry program, and a salary that will let you focus entirely on development and innovation. You'd also continue your content creation. In fact, I'd encourage it. Having a partner with a media presence would be valuable for the new location. The offer was beyond anything Audrey had imagined possible. Partnership in a restaurant with one of Portland's most respected chefs, creative freedom to develop innovative pastries, and the financial security to pursue her passion without worrying about rent money. But more than the practical benefits, Chef Rodriguez's call represented something even more valuable: recognition from the culinary community that Audrey was the real innovator, regardless of what Jessica claimed on social media. There's one more thing, Chef Rodriguez added. I saw that your family member posted something yesterday claiming she developed the reverse lamination technique you featured in Serious Eats. Just so you know, anyone with actual pastry experience can tell that's impossible. Her technique video shows fundamental misunderstandings of laminated dough science. She's embarrassing herself to anyone who actually knows what they're looking at. After hanging up, Audrey realized something profound had shifted. Jessica could steal recipes and manipulate narratives for her lifestyle audience, but she couldn't fake the deep technical knowledge that industry professionals recognized and valued. Audrey had found her true competitive advantage, not just innovation, but the ability to understand, explain, and teach the science behind culinary techniques. It was something that couldn't be stolen, copied, or faked. For the first time since this nightmare began, Audrey Cole knew she was going to win. 6 months after Chef Rodriguez's partnership offer, Audrey stood in the gleaming kitchen of Tierra Cafe's new location, watching her pastry team execute the morning's batch of her signature reverse laminated croissants. The cafe had been open for 3 weeks, and every morning brought lines of customers eager to try pastries they couldn't get anywhere else. The transformation had been remarkable. Audrey's partnership with Chef Rodriguez hadn't just given her financial security, it had provided a laboratory for continuous innovation. With access to professional-grade equipment and a team of skilled pastry cooks, she developed 12 new applications of her reverse lamination technique, each one pushing the boundaries of what laminated pastries could achieve. Her social media presence had exploded alongside the cafe's success. Her Instagram account now had 147,000 followers. Her YouTube channel had passed 89,000 subscribers, and her weekly newsletter reached 23,000 food professionals and serious home bakers. More importantly, her audience consisted of people who genuinely understood and valued culinary innovation. The morning routine had become meditative. Audrey would arrive at 5 a.m. to work on new recipe development while her team prepared the established menu items. This particular Tuesday, she was experimenting with incorporating matcha powder into butter layers, exploring how the tea's tannins interacted with dairy fats during the lamination process. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Have you seen Jessica's latest post? You need to look at this." With flour-dusted fingers, Audrey opened Instagram and navigated to Jessica's account. What she found there made her laugh out loud, not from cruelty, but from pure amazement at how completely the situation had reversed itself. Jessica's recent posts told a story of gradual decline. Her follower count had dropped from its peak of 18,000 back down to around 11,000. Her engagement rates had plummeted as her audience realized she wasn't producing the innovative content they'd initially followed her for. The comment sections, once filled with praise for her honesty and transparency, now contained increasing numbers of people asking when she was going to share something original. But the post Maya had flagged was different. It was titled, "Taking a Break, Important Update for My Community." In it, Jessica announced she was stepping back from regular content creation to focus on family and personal growth. She thanked her followers for their support and mentioned that recipe development had proven more challenging than she initially expected. She wrote, taking time to really master the fundamentals before sharing more original content. Reading between the lines, it was clear what had happened. Jessica had tried to capitalize on Audrey's lamination technique breakthrough by posting her own innovative pastry methods, but her attempts had been disasters. Comments from professional bakers had pointed out fundamental errors in her techniques, and several food bloggers with larger audiences had publicly critiqued her obvious lack of understanding. The final straw had apparently come when Jessica tried to demonstrate a collaboration technique for incorporating flavors into pastry layers. Her video showed her attempting something vaguely similar to Audrey's reverse lamination method, but with such poor technique that the results looked more like flavored scrambled eggs than laminated dough. "This is painful to watch," one pastry chef had commented. "Please don't attempt laminated dough techniques without proper training. This is going to mislead people who are trying to learn." The comment had received over 200 likes and dozens of replies from other professionals expressing similar concerns about Jessica's lack of technical knowledge. Audrey pocketed her phone and returned to her matcha experiments. The irony wasn't lost on her. While she'd been building genuine expertise and earning industry recognition, Jessica had been exposed as someone who could steal recipes but couldn't actually understand or innovate them. At 9 a.m., as the cafe's morning rush began, Audrey received a call that put the perfect capstone on her journey. "Audrey Cole, this is Jennifer Walsh from the Portland Culinary Arts Festival. I called you about your competition win last year." "Of course. How can I help you?" "Well, we have a rather unusual situation. We're planning next year's festival, and we'd like to invite you to be one of our featured judges for the amateur baking competition. Your expertise in pastry innovation and your educational approach make you exactly what we're looking for." Audrey nearly dropped her whisk. From competition winner to competition judge in less than a year. It was a level of professional recognition she'd never imagined possible. Additionally, Jennifer continued, we're launching a new category next year, technical innovation in baking. We want to recognize bakers who are pushing the field forward, not just executing traditional techniques well. Would you be willing to help us design the judging criteria? After accepting the invitation, Audrey walked through the cafe's dining room, observing the steady stream of customers enjoying pastries born from her innovations. Many of them were food industry professionals. She recognized several local chefs, a food writer from the Portland Tribune, and 2 culinary school instructors who'd become regulars.
At a corner table, she noticed a young woman about her own age, carefully photographing one of the reverse laminated palmiers, making notes in a small notebook. She looked like a culinary student, probably trying to reverse engineer the technique.
Audrey approached her table. "Excuse me, are you trying to figure out how these are made?" The woman looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I'm a pastry student at the Culinary Institute, and I've never seen anything like this structure. The flavor distribution is so even throughout the layers. I was hoping to understand the technique better." "Would you like me to show you?" Audrey offered. "I'm Audrey Cole. I developed this method. If you have 30 minutes, I can walk you through the basic principles." The student's eyes widened. "You're Audrey Cole? I follow your YouTube channel. Your lamination series completely changed how I think about pastry structure." For the next half hour, Audrey sat with the student, Sarah Chen, no relation to Maya, explaining the science behind reverse lamination, sketching diagrams on napkins, and sharing the insights that had taken months of experimentation to discover. The key insight, Audrey explained, is understanding that traditional lamination focuses on creating distinct butter and dough layers, but there's no reason the butter layers themselves can't be complex. Once you understand the temperature and moisture requirements, you can engineer almost any flavor profile into the fat layers. Sarah took careful notes, asking thoughtful questions that showed she genuinely understood the underlying principles. This was what Audrey loved most about her new role in the food community, not just creating innovations, but teaching others to innovate themselves. As Sarah prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something? I saw some blog posts claiming you didn't develop this technique yourself, that it was collaborative work with a family member. But watching you explain it just now, it's obvious you understand every aspect of the science. Those posts were wrong, weren't they?" Audrey smiled. "Let me put it this way. If someone truly collaborated in developing a technique, they'd be able to explain the reasoning behind each step, not just follow a recipe. Real innovation comes from understanding principles, not just copying procedures." Sarah nodded thoughtfully and left with a wave. That evening, Audrey sat in her new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with an actual dining room and a kitchen large enough for serious recipe development. She reviewed the day's progress. Her matcha lamination experiments had shown promise, her cafe partnership was thriving, and she had a feature article coming out in Food and Wine magazine next month. More importantly, she'd found her true calling, not just creating innovative food, but fostering a community of people who valued genuine expertise and continuous learning over quick fame and borrowed success. Her phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. She'd gained 847 new followers that day, mostly food professionals and culinary students drawn by her educational content and proven innovations. Jessica's last post, announcing her break from content creation, had received 34 likes and 3 comments. As Audrey prepared for bed, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. Jessica's theft of her recipe had felt like the end of the world, but it had actually been the beginning of something far greater than she'd ever imagined possible. By forcing Audrey to prove her expertise publicly, Jessica had inadvertently launched her into a career that combined all her passions: innovation, education, and community building around genuine culinary excellence. Sometimes, Audrey realized, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's becoming so successful that the original offense becomes irrelevant. She fell asleep that night, knowing that tomorrow would bring new experiments, new innovations, and new opportunities to share real knowledge with people who valued it. The recipe thief had become a footnote in a much larger story of triumph. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.